You know that I had the Hamburg tapes.
Right.
You know the Beatles live at the Star Club.
Right, that I've got.
Yeah, well, I want to tell the story of how I got ripped off on that as well. I'm known as the man who gave the Hamburg tapes away now. I've got lots of interesting stories about how I first came over to Philadelphia. And they bounced the check for my speaker's fee, and they bounced the check for my airfare. I got lots of things where I've had to sneak out of hotels because the promoters hadn't paid the hotel. I got lots of lovely little stories like that.
You've had a lot of problems, in other words, over the years in dealing with the memories of the Beatles.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of what I call BPs. You know what a BP is?
What's a BP?
It's a beetle parasite. And yeah, but they all came out, all these parasites came out of the woodwork when John Lennon was tragically killed. That everybody, and even some of his friends like Peter Brown, who wrote a book, and they're writing a lot of dirt about it.
How do you feel? Let me just, since you brought that up, Gary, May Pang is an interesting thing. She was a very unattractive woman, as I recall, in People magazine is when I first saw her, and the story was that she was John Lennon's surrogate lover that was all this was set up by Yoko Ono. It was a mess.
Yeah, well, don't you think that's a private story? Why tell it to make a fast book when one of the most famous, beautiful people in the history of music is dead? You know that you can't sue from the grave. And all these people who are writing books, to me, they have no credibility whatsoever.
Did the Beatles say that about you, though? I mean, you write books and you talk about it.
Yes, but my book was written in 1975, when all the Beatles were, you know, still there. They were sent the galley proofs. In actual fact, I'll give you the quote from John Lennon. And this boy who's talking to me on the phone now will back it up. John Lennon wrote a little quotation, a very nice quotation, saying that Allan Williams' book is the only book that gives a true insight of what it was like to be an early Beatle.
So they actually approved of what you were writing at the time?
He did.
Yeah.
The others knocked me slightly.
Yeah. All right. Gary, thanks for calling. Did we get your address?
Sure.
All right. We're going to send you one of those Beatle postcards.
Oh, you didn't get my address
All
yet.
right. You hang on the line for a minute.
Yesterday and today, our theater's been jammed with...
Yeah, you're holding up a record, and the record label is Odeon, or whatever it is?
That's right. It's...
What's he talking about?
It's one of the records they made, Ich liebe something. It's in German.
Yeah, I think so.
And Paul McCartney, actually, I was talking to him backstage about the Hamburg tapes.
Right.
And he wrote on the sleeve of that his address to write to the Eastman.
Yeah, Eastman 34 or something or another.
That's right.
You can just make it out.
You can just make it out. Yeah, well, he'd written that for me to send him the tape, of which I did. I did everything legal to get that tape,
right.
Released. I actually went and had a meeting with George and Ringo at the Apple Studios in London.
Right.
And we gave them a copy of it, and they were supposed to send it to John. And nothing happened. And so we went to the courts to officially release it, and they tried to slam an injunction. But the legal side was that we won the case.
Right.
That's why you're hearing the record today.
I got one more small question that's been bothering me ever since then. You hear all kinds of conflicting things about who started the haircut. Was it Astrid Kirchherr or Stu Sutcliffe? Or was it George Harrison? There's some that say George Harrison started the haircut.
The Beatles haircut.
Yeah, no, I can lay this one to rest forever. It was Astrid, and for those out there
who's Astrid?
Yeah, I'm going to explain. Astrid was Stuart Sutcliffe's girlfriend. She was a German girl, and they fell in love in Hamburg, and she was an artistic photographer.
All right, great.
And she actually put them in all the leather gear. Remember when they all used to wear leathers?
Right.
Interesting story come up about
I got to ask you
yeah.
about that.
And she actually designed the haircut of Stu.
Why did she do this? I mean, why come up with a different hairstyle?
Well, she was just that sort of artistic photographer, and she wanted a different hairstyle to photograph. In actual fact, when Stuart went on stage with this haircut, the others just fell about laughing. But then it grew on them, and then gradually they said to Astrid, would you like to cut our hair the same way, Astrid? And so eventually, except Pete Best, the drummer. He had a haircut like Tony Curtis.
He's the one that wouldn't do it, right?
He's the one that wouldn't do it, and that's why he's not a Beatle today.
That's my question. Did that lead to his demise in the group?
Partly, but you see, he wasn't a Beatle really. The Beatles didn't just finish when they finished playing. They would socialize together. And he wasn't into, drinking heavily or taking the amphetamines or whatever was crazy in those days.
Were they doing that?
Yeah.
Well, listen, they had to work maybe 8 hours a night.
Yeah.
Right? Till 3 o'clock in the morning. Then, when they finished work, that was their time to relax. And in Hamburg, it's a 24-hour non-stop city. When they finished work, they would go to their own clubs. So to keep them going, that's when they were introduced to amphetamines, to keep them going.
I thank you, Kenny. Do we have your address?
No, I don't think so.
You hang on the line.
Sure will.
Thank you,
nice
sir.
Nice to talk to you, Alan.
Okay, pleasure.
One line at 655 WJNO is open. How many more cards do we have? Do we have more cards? Yeah, we have some more. So if you want one of these postcards, they come from Liverpool.
Yeah, they come from the Merseyside Council.
And we will be happy to send them to you. We're just going to mail it to you like a regular postcard, and that way it might be worth even more since it's gone through the mail.
No, it won't. It'll have an American stamp on.
Oh, that's right. If you had a Liverpool stamp, then we'd be doing okay.
That would, you could pretend you've been to Liverpool for your holidays, but you can't if it's a Florida stamp on.
It's 11:42 on WJNO. My guest, Allan Williams. He is the first manager of the Beatles. One question about the Beatles haircut. At the time that the haircut was popular, when they came to America, parents across America recoiled in terror, in absolute horror that their children would dare wear bangs and have their hair combed down over their forehead. By today's standard, that is a very tame haircut today.
Oh, very tame, yeah. I think in those days they wanted their children to look as though they'd been in the U.S. Marines.
That's right. It's the crew cut, the flat top, the ducktail haircut, perhaps. That was in. Elvis combed his hair back, but nobody combed it forward.
Yeah, but if you go back in your own country with the Davy Crockett's, I'm sure their hair wasn't short.
That's true. That's true.
Well, same in my country, we had the Cavaliers, history and all this with long hair.
When the parents were reacting in the United States with horror, were the parents in England reacting the same way? Because obviously the Beatles' haircut spread across England and all of Europe too. So did they react the same way?
Yes, there was that resentment. There is always this generation gap. I used to say to the parents, well, what did you do? What sort of haircuts did you have? What sort of clothes did you wear? Did you wear those stupid drapes and drain pipes and all things like that? Which they did. Every generation does their own thing.
Zoot suits, I think they call it.
Zoot suits, that's right, yeah.
We'll pause for a moment, and we'll get right back to Alan in just a moment, and to your phone calls, too, on WJNO News Radio. Let's talk for... Let me just ask you this, because we were talking about this off the air, and perhaps we should put this to rest once and for all. There was never a chance, even before John Lennon was killed, there was never a chance that the Beatles would get back together, you think?
Definitely not. Remember I spoke before of meeting Paul in Philadelphia?
Yes.
When I do these chat shows, and when it comes to question time, that's the number one question that I used to be asked. And so I asked Paul, look, Paul, I said, are you going to get back together? And he says, no, Alan. I said, you're not saying no, and then next week I read in the paper that he said, no. He said, look, it's like leaving school. This is his quote. It's like leaving school. You don't ever go back.
That's it. It was over when they broke up.
Yeah.
Yeah. The situation about the Beatles, this mystique about the Beatles, you're telling me that you were doing a radio talk show in New York and 300 people showed up at the studio?
Yeah. It was a late night program. And the presenter like yourself just said, well, we've got Alan in the studios. And next minute, the security said, hey, we've got all these cars arriving, wanting to meet him to sign autographs. It was amazing, yeah.
Let's take some more calls. Barry's on the line, and you're on WJNO. Barry, hello.
Hello, Barry.
Welcome.
I'd like to ask Mr. Williams about a song that's on an album called Get Back to Toronto. And it's got a cut on there called Teddy Boy that John and Paul are just kind of jamming on the acoustic guitars on. And it's on Paul's Cherries album, which I thought Paul wrote it originally. I was wondering who the song was wrote about and who wrote the song.
I honestly have to duck on that one. I honestly don't know. You'll have to find somebody who's a Beatle aficionado. I can only answer questions basically up to the Hamburg days and the magical days of formative years of the Beatles. I have to pass. I honestly can't answer that question.
Oh, another thing is, I saw Pete Best on a talk show not too long ago, and he says that the reason he that Ringo took his job was because he was too good looking, and he was stealing all the thunder from the, all the girls for the group. So that's why they